Water shot into the air like a geyser, spraying across the street in wild arcs. It looked like a broken fountain gone rogue. Neighbors poured out of their homes, shouting, trying to make sense of the chaos. But cutting through all the noise wasn't a cry for help. It was a complaint, a piercing, familiar voice that could only belong to one person, Karen Whitfield, the self-appointed queen of our HOA. While firefighters rushed to connect hoses and contain the burst hydrant, she stormed straight toward the massive red engine that had just rolled onto her precious cul-de-sac, arms flailing, fury blazing. "You can't park here," she screeched. "You're violating HOA regulations." Everyone froze. I was one of them, standing ankle-deep in the flooding street, my shoes soaked and sinking into the muddy pavement. The firefighters didn't even look at her. They were too busy fighting to keep the water from swallowing half the block, but ignoring Karen Whitfield. That was never an option. She whipped out her phone, snapping pictures of the license plate on the fire truck, muttering something about towing it at the owner's expense. And yes, you heard that right. She actually wanted to tow a fire truck. The whole mess had started when a contractor hit a line earlier that afternoon, causing the hydrant to rupture. In minutes, water pressure in the entire neighborhood dropped, and one of the corner houses was already flooding. The fire department arrived fast, faster than anyone expected, and they had to block part of the street just to stop the water from reaching the electrical systems. Nobody cared that the truck was parked in the middle of the road. Nobody but Karen. She marched up to the fire captain himself, jabbing a finger like she was his boss. "You have no right to block our street," she snapped. "HOA bylaws forbid commercial vehicles from parking here without written permission. Move it now or I'll have it towed." The captain just stared at her, completely dumbfounded. Then, without a single word, he turned his back and started barking new orders to his crew. That made her furious. She raised her phone, again this time louder, announcing to everyone within earshot that she was calling the towing company the HOA used for violations. The crowd collectively gasped. One firefighter, dragging a hose, he muttered under his breath, "Lady, this is an emergency," as he brushed past her. But Karen wasn't backing down. She planted herself squarely in front of that fire engine, heels digging into the wet asphalt like she was ready for battle. And then she made her move, because Karen Whitfield never bluffed. Within 10 minutes, we all heard the low growl of an approaching engine. A white tow truck rolled slowly down the street, its backup lights flashing as it crept closer. My stomach dropped. She'd actually done it. She'd really called them. The driver jumped out looking bewildered. I got a call about a vehicle blocking emergency access," he said, squinting at the massive red fire engine. His eyes widened and he actually laughed. "Ma'am, this can't be right." But Karen shoved a clipboard with the HOA's logo into his hands. "The fire department is in violation," she declared. "That truck doesn't belong here. Tow it, or I'll report your company for breach of contract." By now, the firefighters were shouting over the roar of water, trying to keep it from running into storm drains and electrical boxes. The captain finally had enough. He stormed back toward her, voice raised over the chaos. "Move aside before you're arrested for obstruction," he barked. His tone made it clear he wasn't kidding. But Karen, she didn't even blink. "You don't scare me," she said, her voice sharp as a blade. "You answer to the law, and this neighborhood has rules. You're not above them." The tow driver shifted uncomfortably, realizing he'd stepped into something way over his pay grade. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "I don't think my truck can even move that thing. It's chained down, got air brakes." Karen cut him off before he could finish. "Then call another. I don't care if you bring 3 trucks. That fire engine is leaving now." Neighbors started whispering, some filming on their phones. One guy yelled, "Karen, are you insane? They're trying to stop the flooding." But she tuned out every voice but her own. That's when the fire captain quietly reached for his radio. None of us could hear what he said, but a few minutes later, a police cruiser turned onto the street, siren chirping once before going silent. An officer stepped out, scanning the chaos, the flooding hydrant, the fire truck, the tow driver frozen in confusion, and Karen, standing tall in front of it all, arms crossed like a general ready for war. She wasted no time. She stormed toward him, waving her papers like they were court documents. "Officer, arrest them for trespassing. They're breaking HOA law and damaging property." The cop blinked, then looked from her to the fire truck and back again. He didn't speak at first, but I could see the tension in his shoulders as his hand drifted to rest on his belt. That's when it hit me. This was about to go from ridiculous to serious. The officer raised a hand, motioning for Karen to stop, but she didn't even notice. She shoved the papers toward him, her voice cutting through the noise. "Do your job. Remove that vehicle. The bylaws are clear." The officer didn't take the papers. His eyes moved past her, to the firefighters still wrestling with the torrent of water. And that's when the real showdown began. The officer's eyes drifted from the chaos of the scene, fire hoses, water spraying into the air, firefighters shouting, to the tow truck driver standing awkwardly on the curb. The poor guy looked like he wanted to disappear, hands half raised in surrender, silently begging, "Please don't drag me into this." "Ma'am," the officer finally said, his voice calm but firm. "This is an active emergency scene. You need to step back immediately." Karen's face flushed red, the kind of red that always came right before one of her meltdowns. "No," she snapped. "The only emergency here is that they've taken over our street without authorization. This neighborhood has standards. That truck is in violation, and you're obligated to enforce the law." The officer tilted his head slightly, almost like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "the fire department is the law in this situation. They're authorized under state code to access any roadway during an emergency." But Karen wasn't listening. She never did. She pointed toward the fire truck, voice rising to a shrill pitch that echoed through the neighborhood. "Then I'll file a civil complaint against all of you. This HOA has rights, and I will not let outsiders trample them. If you won't do your job, officer, then I'll handle it myself." Before anyone could stop her, she spun on her heel and stomped toward the fire truck. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She reached down and grabbed one of the thick, heavy hoses snaking across the street. "Ma'am, let go of that!" a firefighter shouted, but she didn't. She yanked at the hose like it was a garden line out of place. The result was instant chaos. The water pressure jerked, spraying in wild, uncontrolled arcs that drenched her from head to toe and splattered across the fire captain, who lunged forward to wrestle it back under control. Neighbors screamed. Phones went up. Everyone knew this was going viral. The officer rushed forward, grabbing Karen's arm. "That's enough! You're interfering with emergency personnel!" "Don't touch me!" she shrieked, twisting and pulling away. "I know my rights." Her voice cracked, half fury, half panic. The tow driver threw up his hands and backed off. "I'm out of here," he muttered, climbing into his truck. A moment later, his tires splashed through the puddles as he drove off, leaving Karen standing there, soaked, trembling, and furious. The officer's patience snapped. His face hardened as he raised his radio. "Dispatch, I need additional units," he said, his eyes never leaving her. Within minutes, 2 more police cruisers rolled around the corner, lights flashing silently. The energy shifted instantly. The crowd grew quiet, the weight of what was about to happen settling over us all. Karen looked around like a cornered animal, drenched, mascara running, eyes wild. She didn't seem to grasp just how deep she'd gone this time. One of the new officers stepped out, scanning the scene as the first officer gave a quick, steady rundown. "She interfered with emergency operations," he said. "Attempted to have the fire truck towed and tampered with department equipment." You could hear the tension in his tone. It wasn't anger. It was disbelief. Karen scoffed, brushing back her wet hair with shaking hands. "Oh, please." "That's ridiculous. I'm the HOA president. I have authority here. These men work for me." That was the breaking point. The fire captain, soaked, exhausted, and fed up, turned to face her, his voice booming across the street. "Lady, you nearly compromised an entire block. We were seconds away from declaring this a disaster zone, and you think your HOA rules matter right now?" Even the kids hiding behind their parents flinched. The second officer stepped forward, jaw tight. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for obstruction and interference with emergency services." He reached for her wrist. Karen's response was an ear-splitting shriek. "No, you can't do this. I'm the victim here," she thrashed, slipping on the wet pavement as the officers held her steady. The cuffs clicked into place. Around us, the neighborhood went silent except for the rush of water, and then she froze. Her wide, stunned eyes darted between the officers and the crowd. This was the woman who fined people for leaving trash cans out for 5 minutes too long. The same woman who sent warning letters about mailbox paint colors. Now she stood in handcuffs while half the neighborhood filmed her downfall. The firefighters went back to work. The hydrant's pressure dropped, the spray died down, and finally the water began to recede. One of the firefighters shook his head, muttering, "Unbelievable." The tow truck was long gone. All that remained was Karen's shiny SUV parked neatly by the curb, an ironic monument to her arrogance. When the officers led her toward the cruiser, someone in the crowd clapped once. Then another joined in. Within seconds, the entire street broke into applause. Karen twisted toward us, shouting over her shoulder, "You'll all regret this. You're traitors! Traitors!" But her voice was swallowed by the sound of the cruiser door slamming shut. And just like that, she was gone. That night, the videos hit social media like wildfire. By morning, everyone knew her name. Karen Whitfield wasn't just the HOA president anymore. She was the woman who tried to tow a fire truck during an active emergency and ended up in handcuffs for the entire world to see. And that's how the HOA president who thought she was untouchable learned the hard way. Nobody, not even Karen Whitfield, is above the law. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another unbelievable HOA meltdown. And drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were there that day? I'll be reading and replying to as many as I can.